funded when it comes to things like more roads, relieving congestion, all the things that we know we need to do. And, on the one hand, it's great to have to, announce some of these things because we're actually a state that people want to move to, and they're moving away from some of these other places. I mean, you got Grady Judd. He's got people. There's people that'll see him around the country and they'll decide to move to Polk County because they want to make sure they have a law and order sheriff in a free state. And so Polk County, I mean, how much has the population grown just in the last 4 or 5 years? But I mean, you go back when I was growing up on the west coast of Florida, it's considered very rural relative. And now there's like over 800,000 people. So we're seeing this and all over the state. And we do have Sheriff Judd is here. I just want to recognize him and thank him for his good work. We also have our Florida Department of Transportation Secretary, Jared Perdue, Representative Chuck Clemens, and then we have Vince Heffley. Did I say that right? Okay, close enough. Yeah, good. From the Florida Transportation Builders Association to talk about some of the projects. So Florida, we were able to announce last week, since I took office in 2019, our economy has grown 22%. The nation as a whole since 2019 has grown half that much, 11%. So we've doubled the national average in economic growth over the last 5.5 years. We just signed a budget a couple weeks ago now. Even though we did record transportation and road control, which I'm going to talk about, even though we had record funding for education, even though we had record funding for conservation and environment, we actually spent less in this coming budget than we're doing the current year. Who's reducing spending anywhere in our country? Certainly not in Washington, D.C. So we're doing that, and that means we're the top fiscal shape really anywhere in the country. We now have the lowest per capita debt, state debt of any state in the United States out of all 50 states. We also have, I think we're second lowest in state per capita tax burden. Of course, no income tax, but we've also done major tax relief. We did $2.5 billion in the current fiscal year. Next year's budget is additional $1.5 billion. And some of this stuff is reflected like $1.5 billion, $2.5. This current fiscal year, we did the no sales tax on baby items, and we made that permanent. So anything you need for raising a baby, diapers, cribs, strollers, clothes, formula, it's all tax-free in Florida. That's just now on the books, so we don't keep counting that going forward, but families are still saving on that. And we also did in 2023, we did it again this year starting in April, is toll relief. So our commuters get a 50% reduction in their tolls at the end of the month. That's a huge, huge savings, especially in areas that have a lot of toll facilities, which those were all here when I got here. I didn't put any of those up, but they're there, and we want to try to provide relief from them. So we've done that. And we've been able to do these things. We're ranked #1 in education 2 years in a row in the entire country by U.S. News and World Report. #1 ranked public university system for 6 consecutive years here in the state of Florida. And oh, by the way, the amount that tuition for our in-state tuition for our citizens has gone up since I've been governor is $0. No increase in tuition, period. You look at Florida, we're #1 for new business formations and have been for quite some time. And, we're the 3rd largest state, so obviously we should have more business formations than a state like Rhode Island or some of the small states. But, we have more business formations than California, which is twice the population of Florida almost, not quite anymore because they're losing population because of the bad policies. Who wants to have to dodge homeless people all over the streets just to go get a cup of coffee? People don't like that. But so you have that. So even with states having, California, many more millions of people than we do, we still have more business formations. And then if you look at our private sector growth, we grew 2.2% over the last 12 months, the national rate was 1.6%, and our labor force grew almost twice as fast as the nation's as a whole. We have had lower unemployment than the nation as a whole for 43 consecutive months. So we're leading, we're getting the job done. Oh, and by the way, our crime rate's at a 50-year low because of Grady Judd and other people. So all that being said, that provides opportunities, but also provides challenges. And the reality is when you lead the nation in net in-migration year after year, which we have now for a number of years, that requires there to be the supporting infrastructure to be able to handle that. I can't, as an American citizen, you can move to whatever state you want to. If they let me set up an immigration system just for Florida, I mean, we probably would do that, and but that's just not the way it works. And so when we have success, it does attract more folks. When these other states do dumb things, more people want to leave those states. So we're in a situation where we've got to make sure that we're accommodating this. And part of our focus has been on accelerating projects that were probably in the hopper to happen 10 years from now, probably not getting done for 20 plus years, accelerating them, infusing the cash, and getting this done ahead of schedule. And that's what we promised to do. I remember I came to Central Florida in 2023 saying we were going to have this big, ambitious Moving Florida Forward initiative. We got a lot of that in last year's budget, and then we've basically completed what we need in this year's budget. But since I became governor in 2019, we've invested almost $70 billion to improve transportation infrastructure in the state of Florida. And our main focus has been on reducing congestion. That's, to me, the most important thing. I mean, we want to have good roads. We want people to be able to get where they need to go as quickly as possible. But we're in a situation where there's a lot of growth, so we got to accommodate for that. So moving Florida forward has been something that I'll talk about in a minute, but I think that just shows we could have just sat around and not done anything about it and just said, well, we have these projects, all that's going to eventually get done. Or we can say, no, let's just get it done as soon as possible, and let's put more resources to bear and move on. But so this current year budget, or for starting July 1st that I signed a couple weeks ago, we have $14.5 billion for 946 different transportation projects across the state. And that includes over $5 billion to maintain and construct new highways. And just for this year's budget will equal a total increase in 140 new lane miles throughout the state. Since 2019, that's almost $25 billion for close to 1,000 new lane miles in the last 5 years, which is really important. We also have $1.8 billion to resurface roadways and to fill potholes. We've done almost $25 billion and resurfaced over 12,000 miles of roadway since I've been governor. And if you travel to other states, I mean, I like the new roads where it's like, okay, you have traffic, now you can have ways to alleviate. That is, to me, you're doing new things or whatever. But if you look at making sure that the roads are in good shape, a lot of places don't do that. You drive around New York City, and if you drive around to all the different boroughs, they are charging you massive tolls to go across this bridge and that bridge. And if you drove around all those areas, you'd be paying $30, $40, $50, $60 in tolls probably just one day hopscotching around there. It's a lot, very stiff tolls. And yet, you drive on these roads and you get motion sickness because it's so bad. It's like bump, a bump, a bump, a bump, and I'm just like, man, where does all that money go? It's certainly isn't fixing the road. So that's really important. And people have said when they've looked at Florida's infrastructure, we're ranked in the top 5 for the quality of our roadways across all 50 states, which, that's great in and of itself. It's also great when you're a high population state. If you're in some of these states that have lower populations, it's probably easier to keep the roadways nice because you have as many people on them. We've got a lot of traffic. We've got ports. We've got big trucks taking goods from ports. We have all this stuff, tourists, you name it, and we're in the top 5. So that's really significant. We also have in this year's budget almost $400 million to repair 72 bridges and replace another 15 bridges. So that'll be almost 600 bridge repairs or replacements since 2019, and including after Hurricane Ian, we were able to reconnect bridges to those islands in record time and really help save the recovery for those areas. We also have $1.4 billion to support intermodal improvements. A lot of money for airports, which are expanding, and Orlando is a good example of that. We have over $100 million for seaports and $960 million for different rail, like the freight rail that goes across the country from here. So really, really good. We've done a lot on airports. We've done a lot on seaports. These are great engines for Florida's economy and future. But if you look at moving Florida forward, so I've got some of these. So if you look, this is like the Orlando area, and you all know, so, here's Polk County, Osceola, Orange. Some of these projects were in the hopper, you can see, and those are funded, and those are going to happen. So you see different things around I-4, you see different things. I'll show you the one in Tampa where we've got some more stuff there. But moving Florida forward, that's those dark spots. So none of that was going to happen. Probably would have happened in 10 years. They would have started it. But we understand in these areas, I mean, there's really severe traffic and severe congestion there. So we wanted to put all this money in, and we have the biggest budget surpluses we've ever had in the history of the state, and we're cutting taxes. We're very wise with spending, but if we have situations where we know we're going to need to do this one way or another, might as well get it done. So some of the projects have been really, really important on I-4 and the connecting roadways to supplement what was already going to happen. And I think that this is going to end up saving huge amounts of hours waiting in traffic, over the next 10 or 15 years compared to what would have happened if we didn't put our foot on the gas and lean into some of these projects. And, you go, it's one thing to have rush hour traffic. I mean, you want to try to alleviate that. You go in some of these areas, I mean, you could go at any time of the day and you could have backup. Some of these areas with like Champions Gate and all those areas can just be really, really bad. And part of that is there's a lot of visitors, there's attractions, all this stuff. But part of it is, we need to move these projects up. So we're accelerating those, and they're going to be really happy ahead of schedule. So you have Polk, Osceola, Orange going to really benefit. But I've also got, and you can see the different, from the Tampa perspective, going into Polk. So we're kind of over here. I-75 in Ocala. If you've ever had to drive that, you don't know what's going to happen on I-75 when you're in that area. So all of that is accelerated there in the northern part as we get north of the Central Florida area to be able to help with the flow there. And that's something that definitely needs to be done. Again, this wouldn't have been done. They wouldn't have even started this for another 10 years probably had we not done that. Some of the stuff on the other map, and then we've got stuff here that we're accelerating in the Tampa Bay area. So that whole Central Florida area, and you even got Sarasota, Bradenton area. But all of that, I would say, of moving Florida forward, there's big projects in Miami. There's stuff in Southwest Florida. There is stuff around the state, the Panhandle. But I would say Central Florida is probably the largest beneficiary because, quite frankly, that's where we've seen so much rapid growth, and we've seen some of the congestion due. So 75, I-4 corridor, even down into Sarasota, Bradenton, you're looking at really significant improvements. And one of the things that we kind of teased the other day is we're starting all this stuff, and there's obviously, and Jared will talk about major I-4, but as this is being done, they have found a way to be able to, by next year, actually open up an additional lane on I-4 right in that Champions Gate area. So Champions Gate and over to World Drive next year, there will be one additional lane that will be open at I-4. That's going to be a big deal. And that's part of a larger I-4 project, but that's going to make a big difference. Of course, we had the Poinciana Parkway here, which is going to be helpful. So we're really excited about that, and we want to continue to put the pedal on the metal because we understand how important it is for Floridians. Some of this is, if we did nothing, it would obviously get worse because people are coming. If we did kind of what the old schedule was, where, yeah, there's a lot of things in the hopper over the next 25 years, it would be helpful, but you're barely keeping your head above water. The fact that we're accelerating this, we want to meet the increased demand for using roadways in Florida, but then actually get ahead so this stuff moves more smoothly in this area, and that's something that is going to be done. Now, what is our focus in terms of this? Our only focus is on quality of life for Floridians, making sure that we're easing congestion, making sure that we have safe roads, making sure that they're in good shape. We are not using transportation to push an ideological agenda like the Biden administration is doing. It is wrong. We are, even though we're ranked in the top 5 states for roads, I think we're one of the lowest states for receiving any money from this, Biden infrastructure thing. And part of that is we don't do the strings attached. I mean, if we have to sign up for DEI and all this stuff just to receive road funding, we're not going to do that. We're not going to allow the federal government to use the purse strings to impose bad policies on the state of Florida. But make no mistake, they are trying to use transportation and roadways to be able to promote a political agenda. In 2022, the Biden administration Secretary of Transportation launched a $1 billion transportation project that he said would combat racist roads. And I'm thinking, like, everyone can drive our roads. We're not doing, I don't know where you're getting that, trying to do. They also have so-called social justice initiatives that they're trying to use, shoehorn into transportation. And the Federal Highway Administration even tried to circumnavigate Congress by requiring states to track car emissions, despite Congress voting to exclude this authority in the Infrastructure Investment and so-called Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Make no mistake, they want to be able to monitor how you use your vehicles. And in Florida, we can say any proposal that would try to monitor how you're using your vehicle is quite simply dead on arrival in this state. We're not going to let that happen. So we don't want to see the weaponization of transportation dollars. We want to make sure that transportation and road building is focusing on what it should be focusing on, providing our residents with an ability to get to and from in the most efficient and effective way possible. We should not be trying to shoehorn DEI or CRT or climate alarmism into these projects. These projects need to stand on their own 2 feet. Now, I'm pleased to announce that today, to make clear where Florida stands, the Florida Department of Transportation is launching a dedicated portal that will highlight for folks the politicization of the Biden Transportation Department and to demonstrate how Florida is just saying no. So you can visit the portal at roadsarnotforpolitics.com. Roadsarnotforpolitics.com. We will keep our transportation expenditures focused on actually transporting people. We will make sure that we're supporting projects that provide a return on investment for our citizens. And we are not going to allow the federal government's underhanded tactics to impose an agenda on this state that the people have rejected time and time again. And thanks to our good fiscal and financial standing, we have massive projects that are fully funded, ahead of schedule, and we don't need to have our hand out for the federal government. So we're going to continue to doing that. We've never been in better fiscal shape. This budget to spend less than we did last year while also doing all these major things is I don't think you can find a state that's been able to make that work the way we have. So I want to thank the legislature for working with us. We had to go through the budget and obviously make sure that that was in good order. But I think we're in really, really good shape going forward. We've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot that needs to be done. But I've told Jared and his team, you have resources, you have a way forward, and so just get the job done. And we want to get it done as quickly as possible for people. But no matter how it shakes out, clearly, had we just sat on our hands, there'll be projects that you will be driving on within the next however many years that would not have even broken ground by that point had we just sat on our hands. And so this is a really, really big thing. Government usually isn't operating ahead of schedule. They're usually not trying to move things forward. They're usually trying to push deadlines back. But we wanted to be aggressive, and we know it matters a lot to Florida families. And so it's a good use of your tax dollars, and it's something that's going to help our economy and also help Florida families. Okay, so with that, I'd like to bring up our FDOT Secretary to say a few things, Jared Perdue.
Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. And how great is it to have a governor that knows how to run government, loves freedom, and believes in investing in infrastructure. Isn't it great? Yes. Very thankful for the governor's leadership, also to our Florida legislature, who continues to invest in infrastructure year in and year out, and our industry partners. We're all aligned behind that common mission of delivering real infrastructure so that we can preserve the quality of life for Floridians as we continue to grow at a rapid pace. Again, you heard the governor mention we have another record-breaking budget at $14.5 billion for our work program. You heard some of the major investments. He was talking about congestion relief, safety, also critical investments to our airports and our seaports and our railroads. It's so important that we keep our supply chain moving as our population grows. Additionally, moving Florida forward, that initiative that was launched a couple of years ago by the governor is truly historic, and it shows the state's commitment to go above and beyond for our communities. The initiative advanced 20 projects, 15 to 20 years sooner than they would have originally been delivered, and I'm grateful for the governor's leadership on that and grateful for the investments that the Florida legislature made. At the center of this initiative is Central Florida's very own I-4 corridor. How many of you in this room have been stuck on I-4 or I-75 in traffic? Everybody raises their hand. Yeah, you all know it's one of the worst. I've heard the governor's been stuck on I-4 before, so it's no surprise that we're investing in it. With Florida's continued population growth and record investments, the governor has continued to challenge FDOT to find innovative solutions, be more efficient, and cut through red tape. And you heard him just a few minutes ago. This is why we found a way to add 2 new auxiliary lanes to I-4 by the end of 2025. This will bring immediate congestion relief to everyday commuters, and it will continue to provide that relief while we build the much bigger I-4 project that's scheduled to be done in 2030. The new auxiliary lanes will be between State Road 417 and US 27 and will be delivered as part of an early works project utilizing a brand new method called modified phase design build. I mention that because we're partnering with our industry to use a new method to deliver projects, and I'm proud to say that our industry is leading the way, and it's because of the governor's leadership supporting us in cutting through government bureaucracy that we can really do something like this. So while we're innovating and cutting through that bureaucracy, the Biden administration continues to inject social and political ideologies into transportation. This diverts resources and attention away from delivering real infrastructure. Today, USDOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg is actually testifying before Congress on their annual budget request. It will not be surprising to hear a continued focus on wasteful spending and ideas that don't actually build infrastructure. These damaging policies are threaded throughout all of the Biden administration's initiatives. They would rather invest in their failed social and climate policies than in our country's road and bridge infrastructure. The facts speak for themselves, which is why you heard the governor announce we put together a website called roadsarnotforpolitics.com. On this site, you'll learn more about the Biden administration's overreach and them injecting scare tactics and ideologies into transportation, such as with the greenhouse gas rule, which the governor mentioned. Florida, along with 21 other states, actually filed a lawsuit against the federal government to challenge this blatantly unconstitutional rule that was requiring states to track and monitor emissions from your vehicles. Absolutely unacceptable. Additionally, they continue to force an electric vehicle revolution nationwide, even going as far as mandating vehicle manufacturers to produce more EVs than our electric grid can support, and it costs more than the average American can afford. These are just a few examples. There are many more egregious ones that we are fighting against, and we're going to continue to fight to protect your freedoms under Governor DeSantis' leadership. Roadsarnotforpolitics.com. It outlines in detail how the free state of Florida is pushing back and prioritizing our infrastructure instead of political agendas. I appreciate the governor's leadership and forward-thinking approach towards congestion relief and actually providing tangible infrastructure. We're thankful to the legislature for supporting the work we do for our communities, and we stand ready to deliver for Floridians. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. Governor DeSantis, on behalf of all of us working on the ground to reduce congestion and maintain and improve our transportation, I want to thank you. I've lived in Florida since 1982, and I've worked in the engineering and construction fields for about 40 years. I can tell you that I have never seen an administration so dedicated to providing the resources required not only to get the job done right, but also in funding critical infrastructure investments like moving Florida forward to complete jobs years ahead of schedule. Road construction projects provide job opportunities for thousands of Floridians each year and support every aspect of Florida's economy. Continuous maintenance and improvement of our transportation infrastructure enables economic competitiveness, efficient movement of people and goods, and improved quality of life in communities across Florida. As the president of a family-owned company in the transportation construction industry, I'm proud of what we did to serve one of those communities in maybe their darkest hour. In partnership with FDOT, 2 other prime contractors, and many subcontractors and material suppliers, we opened the Sanibel Causeway 3 weeks after Hurricane Ian passed. We achieved 2 things nobody thought could be done. Rebuild an entire causeway in just a few weeks, and maybe even more impressive, got 3 competitors to work together on the same job at the same site to get the job done. How amazing is that? Yeah. However, FDOT's willingness to think outside the box and be innovative was key to making that happen. The department literally lived at the site during the repair, allowing us to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. FDOT prioritized the public safety and movement over contract documents. It was a proud day for everyone involved when we stood with Governor DeSantis and Secretary Perdue and watched the utility convoy head over that bridge. I travel the country representing my industry, and I can tell you Florida is the envy of the nation when it comes to leadership. This starts with Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature and continues on to Secretary Perdue and the FDOT leadership. FDOT is always willing to listen to innovative ideas from our industry. We work together to find solutions for the communities we serve, like what we're doing with moving Florida forward. Now, if we could build a leadership team in Washington modeled after Florida, that would be great. In partnership with FDOT, companies large and small across Florida are working to deliver on Florida's commitment to build roads, not spread ideologies. When Florida's infrastructure spending is mostly state-funded, there are federal dollars that we could use here in the state. However, they are tied to programs with federal agencies have drastically increased in the bureaucratic process, making it difficult to spend those dollars and still be in compliance with the federal highway program. By the time the federal government awards funds for those projects, sometimes a year and a half to 2 years later, inflation has eaten away at the dollars agencies have to spend, often jeopardizing the projects. That has to be fixed. Funding infrastructure now will impact our state for decades into the future. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for enabling FDOT to focus on one thing: delivering a safe and efficient transportation system that keeps Florida moving and open for business.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the opportunity to be here today to represent Speaker Paul Renner on behalf of the Florida House of Representatives. We're happy to be your partner, Governor. Transportation and infrastructure, so very important. You know, since 2019, when Governor Ron DeSantis put his hand on the Bible and First Lady held the Bible for him, I can tell you that things have changed. They've changed not only in Florida, but across the country. You've already heard testimony this morning about the governor making Florida the freest state, and that has attracted a lot of people. Governor, when my family came in 1823, there was only 35,000 people in the whole state. We had some transportation problems because it's hard getting across the river with no bridges, but we did not have any congestion problems. I want to thank you, Governor, for signing a bill that I sponsored earlier in the year with public-private partnerships. It has to do with transportation and making those roads and bridges more affordable and reducing the amount of time from conception to delivery for the benefit of the citizens of Florida, and thank you for supporting that. You know, a record $15.5 billion from a budget from 115, that's 10% of our budget is going into this particular initiative, and that's outstanding. Almost 1,000 projects, that's outstanding. Let me share you briefly the why. The governor has done such a good job making Florida a free state, and Sheriff Judd has done such a great job attracting people to not only Polk County, but to Florida, that congestion seems to have followed those folks. Now, and that may not matter to you, but what it does is it hurts people because they can't get from point A to point B, and like if you come down I-75, you never know when you're going to stop completely, and you may have an appointment with the sheriff, you know, in an hour. You can't get there. I would travel around Florida, Governor, and tell people that because of your work, 900 to 1,200 people a day move to Florida, and people's eyes roll back in their head because they can't understand what you're saying. So I've changed the narrative. What I will say is, since Governor DeSantis has taken office in 2019, there have been 5 new cities of Orlando move to Florida. Let that sink in. Every year, each and every year, a brand new city of Orlando moves from somewhere else because Florida is a free state and they want to be a part of it. Not to mention hurricane evacuations. There's a lot of reasons why we need to reduce congestion. Governor, can't thank you on behalf of the House and the Senate. We're happy to be your partners, and we're looking forward to making lots of progress in the future. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now, so we are in hurricane season. I mean, we obviously hope for the best, but we are prepared on that. But I will just say this, just since we're in the season on evacuations, people have thought, like, okay, if there's a storm coming, you know, Southwest Florida, you got to go and drive up that 75 and go to Georgia or something like that, and you really don't need to do that. When you're in an area, and it's really a decision of the local officials who manage all this, and you're told to evacuate, maybe you're in a coastal area, maybe you're in an area more interior, but that's in a flood-prone area, and they tell you, really, you just need to evacuate to higher ground. These shelters, now anything to be designated a shelter can withstand the wind. Any hotel built in the last 20 years is going to be able to withstand the wind. Any new construction in your personal homes, certainly newer construction since the building code, when we did that 20, 30 years ago, all that. So really it's a short evacuation that needs to happen if it needs to happen. And so just keep that in mind. That's much better than getting on the interstate and you do. I mean, we've had situations in the past in Florida where people were evacuating from one part of the state to the other, then the storm shifted and they're going back and this, and it's like, that's not ideally there. And so that is really, so if you're on the coast, you kind of just get the higher ground, hunker down in a shelter, hotel, friend's house. That is that should be your number one way to do it. Now, maybe there's not room, and it's possible. I get that, and you may have to at some point. But I think it had been ingrained that evacuation means just try to outrun the storm entirely, and that's not really the best way to do it. Especially when the storm passes, you want to make sure you want to look at your property. You want to be able to access that. You want to be close to it. When Ian passed Southwest Florida, I mean, we were in there, the next morning. Actually, they were there that night even doing things, and we wanted to get people back on their feet. It was much easier if they're there, so you can help them with that. So that'll be that. The other thing is this area in particular, in the Central Florida, there's just a lot going on, and this part where we are now, Polk, Osceola, a lot of people have moved into this area. Of course, you got things like Epic Universe at Universal opening next year. It's like a massive theme park. That's going to be a lot of people that are going to be involved in that. It's going to attract more visitors, and you're going to end up seeing probably more stuff in some of the other parks with expansions and even new stuff. So that's all on the horizon. So isn't it good to be investing in this infrastructure now, knowing what may be coming down the pike? So we're excited about these projects. This has been a priority for us. We think it's right. The thing about it is I'll have people that'll move from like New York and they'll come down. In our budget in Florida, we have millions of more people now than New York State does. Our budget is half the budget of New York. Yet, with half the budget and millions of more people, our schools perform better, we have better services, and our roads are better. So where is all this money going that they're taxing these people for this? I don't know, but we're doing it in the way that really makes an impact. So I appreciate that. We look forward to continue to build off this and really moving these projects as to the front of the line as quickly as humanly possible. Okay, we got any questions? Yep.
Yesterday, the Sebring mass shooter was sentenced to death on a 9-3 vote. Do you have any concerns about verdicts for crimes that preceded the law change that are not unanimous being overturned on appeal?
No. Because it's a just punishment for what he did. And we have to look at the worst offenders, and they need to have the most exacting punishment. And that should be, part of it is that's what justice requires. Part of it is we want to make sure that these folks aren't able to harm other people in the future. And even if they're in prison, they can harm people within that system. And I think it's just an appropriate thing. And when you have the juries, so we have the Parkland situation. First of all, when Parkland happened, I wasn't governor yet, but this is February of 2018. Parkland happens. Everyone knows that there's been a shooting. No one knew anything else, and yet people down there all said it was this one guy because they just knew. Like, people knew this would be somebody that would eventually do it. And of course it was, and he admitted to it, and there was really never any question about that. And then it took years just to be able to bring it to a guilty verdict and a penalty phase. And then you go up, and it was like 11-1, I think, was the jury vote. And they said 11 thought capital punishment was appropriate, yet one that's not. And the reason why having the one is because you let somebody that may not be willing to administer capital punishment or vote for it under any circumstances onto a jury, and they have a veto power over this. There's folks that'll say, oh, I'm open-minded, but they just would never in reality pull. And look, I respect that. I respect people that don't believe in capital punishment or don't believe it. I mean, I think that that's a position a lot of people come to very, very honorably, but the people of Florida have decided differently, and if you're not willing to render that judgment when appropriate, then you shouldn't be able to deny justice just because one juror may have these types of views on it. And I think that's what happened in the Parkland situation. And when you have something where it doesn't have to be unanimous, but you have a supermajority, to me, that is sufficient. This is not a question about whether they're guilty or innocent. You need a unanimous jury, and you should for guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But once that's been decided, the appropriate punishment, I think, is something that one of the 12 jurors shouldn't be able to kneecap, particularly based on maybe a personal political philosophy that's just different than where the people of Florida have come down.
Governor, you talk about a surplus budget proudly, and at the same time you talk about a focus on improving quality of life for residents. You recently vetoed all cultural and grant funding. Can you explain that decision, given it's going to impact organizations here in Polk that people use on a daily basis?
Well, if you look at, so this is money that would go, and we didn't have control over how it was being given. So you have your tax dollars being given in grants to things like the Fringe Festival, which is like a sexual festival where they're doing all this stuff. And it's like, how many of you think your tax dollars should go to fund that? Not very many people would do that. And so when I see money being spent that way, I have to be the one to stand up for taxpayers and say, you know what, that is an inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars. And I think the legislature needs to reevaluate how that's being done. You know, we don't need to say that somebody that's working hard is paying taxes. I can go to you and say, hey, we've got a very small budget compared to our state's population. We have a low tax burden, all this, but this transportation, these roads are important. I can sell that. Education's important. I can sell that. Preserving our natural resource important. I can sell that. I can't sell the Fringe Festival to taxpayers, nor would I want to try to sell the Fringe Festival to taxpayers.
Yes, sir.
We have found guardrails improperly installed on our highways. What are you doing to make sure that all these guardrails are correctly installed and make sure that in the future it won't happen again?
You want to take that?
Yeah, thank you. So you heard the governor mention we spare no expense when it comes to the maintenance and preservation of the infrastructure we've built. That's resurfacing. That's with guardrail. So, you know, the question about guardrail, yes, there has been stories published nationwide that guardrail's been installed wrong. Here in Florida, we have been very proactive. As soon as we heard that, we sent teams out all across the state to inspect guardrails, to make sure they're installed improperly. We identified those. We quickly moved to make sure they were installed the right way, and we've put a lot of programs in place to ensure that those contractors and vendors installing that guardrail are doing it properly in the future. So that is not an issue here in Florida. You know, we spare no expense when it comes to the maintenance and preservation of our assets. Thank you.
Yep.
Governor, when will you expand I-4 to Tampa?
Well, I-4 goes to Tampa. What do you mean? You mean expanding lanes? Okay. You want to take that?
Yeah, thank you. Getting my steps in. So I-4, there's a plan. The good news is we have a plan. Same thing with the Moving Florida Forward initiative. You know, the governor said, what's it going to take to fix I-4 in Central Florida? The good news is we have a plan. Projects have been prioritized for years. The challenge is resources. The governor has stepped up and brought those resources to the table. I-4 in Central Florida was the absolute most congested part of I-4. That's what we're fixing first. We've advanced that 15 to 20 years. There is a plan in place for I-4 to be widened all the way to Tampa. You know, that plan includes a lot of new infrastructure, a lot of new lanes. It's going to take years to deliver that, but what we're doing today is focusing in on that most congested piece right now, which is what's in Moving Florida Forward, and it's really because of the governor's leadership that we've been able to do that.
And Moving Florida Forward, you know, there are, if you look at the, where are we at? Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the Tampa, I mean, you know, right there, big 275, that's a huge project that's going to make a difference. We had other things in the kitty anyways in that junction area, which I think is really important. But yes, I want to see the lanes as wide as possible as we can all the way through, because I think that thoroughfare, I mean, what's happening is, some people, you have businesses in Tampa, you have businesses in Orlando, and then all this area, I mean, people can come in and open businesses, particularly industry and stuff, and that's been attractive. But you got to have the ability to get around on that. So that'll be something that we'll support and hope. And this wasn't like, we like this area better that. It was like, okay, where are we seeing the congestion at? And I can tell you some of the areas around here have been some of the most difficult in the state. Now you have a plan. This will help alleviate some of the areas, and we've got a big project in Miami there, which I think is going to be helpful. But I mean, that's tougher because it's so built out. So it's not like you could just build a new road. You can kind of stack them. You got to fix the interchanges or things of that nature. But here we do have the opportunity to widen, to do the connectors, to do things that I think are going to make a difference, and it will be really, really good. But Central Florida, from the West Coast all the way through I-4 going into Daytona on the East Coast, that is definitely a growth area. The quality of life is good. People are able to come from other places, and I've even seen people that have moved from other parts of Florida into Central Florida as a good landing spot for them. So we're mindful of that, but there's a lot in here for both our regular work plan, which is fully funded, and our Moving Florida Forward, which is accelerating for the Tampa Bay area, and it's important that we do that. All right, it's great to be back here in Polk County. You all have a good one. Thanks so much.